Have you ever watched someone lose the one person who could save them, and then been forced to choose whether to stay silent or speak up? What if a little girl held the only truth that could stop a wedding, expose a lie, and protect the man she loved most? Stay with this story, because what she does at the altar will break your heart and rebuild it. The afternoon light filtered through sheer curtains, painting the small bedroom in shades of gold and amber. Tasha sat on the edge of the twin bed, her thin frame wrapped in a soft cardigan that hung looser than it had months before. Her daughter, Meera, no more than 6 years old, sat cross-legged on the carpet, carefully arranging her dolls in a circle as if they were attending an important tea party. Tasha watched her with eyes that held both profound love and unbearable sadness. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached out to smooth Meera's dark curls. The same color as her own had been before the treatments began. The little girl looked up, her round face breaking into a smile that made Tasha's heart squeeze painfully in her chest. "Mama, are you playing too?" Meera asked, holding up a tiny porcelain cup. "Always, sweetheart," Tasha whispered, her voice catching. "I'm always playing with you." But even as she smiled, Tasha could feel the exhaustion seeping into her bones, the way her lungs struggled with each breath. The doctors had stopped using words like remission. Now they spoke in timelines, in months that felt both too long and impossibly short. She had things to do, preparations to make, and time was slipping through her fingers like sand. That night, after Daniel had tucked Meera into bed and retreated to his study to work through his worry, Tasha sat at her vanity with a small recording device. Her reflection in the mirror startled her. She looked so different now, so fragile. She pressed record and began to speak, her voice soft but steady. "My darling Meera, if you're hearing this, it means Daddy is trying to move forward, trying to live again. And that's good, baby. That's what I want for him." She paused, swallowing hard. But sometimes people aren't who they seem. Sometimes someone might come into his life who doesn't understand that you are his heart, his purpose, his reason to keep going. If that ever happens, if someone ever tries to push you away from the man who loves you more than anything in this world, you have to show him this. You have to remind him of what we were, of what you are to him. She stopped the recording, her hands shaking. Then she pulled out a stack of papers, photographs, letters she'd written over weeks of sleepless nights. She placed them carefully in a velvet-lined box along with a small golden key and the audio chip. On top, she placed a sealed envelope with Meera's name written in her careful script. The weeks that followed blurred together in a haze of hospital visits and whispered conversations that stopped when Meera entered the room. Tasha grew weaker, her smile becoming more effort than ease, but she never stopped trying. She held Meera's hand during the bedtime stories, memorizing the weight of it in her palm. She kissed Daniel goodnight, as if each kiss could carry her love forward into all the nights she wouldn't be there. One evening, as the sun set in streaks of pink and orange, Tasha called Meera to her bedside. The little girl climbed up carefully, snuggling close as she'd done 1,000 times before. Tasha wrapped one arm around her daughter and held up the velvet box with the other. "This is for you," she whispered against Meera's hair, "but you can't open it yet." "When can I open it?" Meera asked, her small fingers tracing the soft fabric. "You'll know, baby. When Daddy tries to start over, when he finds someone new to love, and he should, he deserves that, you open this box. It will protect him. It will protect both of you." Meera nodded solemnly, not fully understanding but sensing the weight of the moment. She took the box and held it like the treasure it was. 3 days later, Tasha slipped away in the early morning hours, Daniel holding one hand and Meera clutching the other. The house felt emptier after that, as if all the air had been sucked out of the rooms. The velvet box sat on Meera's dresser, untouched, waiting. 5 years passed in a blur of school days and lonely dinners. Daniel did his best, but grief had carved lines into his face that hadn't been there before. He worked long hours at the architecture firm, came home exhausted, tried to help Meera with homework while burning frozen dinners. The house that had once been filled with Tasha's laughter now echoed with silence. Meera, now 11, had learned to be quiet. She made her own breakfast, did her own laundry, sat alone at the kitchen table finishing math problems, while her father stared at blueprints and drank cold coffee. She missed her mother with an ache that never quite went away. But more than that, she missed the father she used to have. The one who laughed, who played, who wasn't buried under the weight of loss. Then Vanessa arrived. She appeared first at a company event, a colleague's wife who just moved to town. She wore elegant dresses and her hair was always perfect, styled in soft waves that caught the light. When she spoke, her voice was smooth honey, and when she laughed, heads turned. Daniel noticed her across the room, and for the first time in years, something flickered in his eyes that wasn't pain. Vanessa made it easy. She asked about his work, listened intently to his stories, touched his arm lightly when she laughed at his jokes. Within weeks, she was stopping by the house with casseroles and helpful suggestions. She organized Daniel's chaotic files, recommended a new dry cleaner, offered to help redecorate the living room that still held all of Tasha's old furniture. Daniel began to breathe again. He smiled more. He stood a little straighter. For the first time since Tasha died, he seemed to believe that life might be worth living. Meera wanted to be happy about it. She tried. When Vanessa first came over, Meera bounded down the stairs, eager to meet this woman, who made her father's eyes crinkle with something like joy. But the moment Daniel stepped into the kitchen to check on dinner, Vanessa's warm expression cooled. She looked at Meera the way someone might look at a stain on expensive fabric, with vague disgust and the desire to remove it. "Hello," Meera said softly. Vanessa turned away without responding, busying herself with arranging flowers she'd brought. It happened again and again. When Daniel was in the room, Vanessa was all smiles and gentle touches, ruffling Meera's hair and asking about school. But the moment he left, her face would go blank. Cold. She'd walk past Meera as if she weren't there. Or worse, she'd look directly at her with eyes that held nothing but irritation. Meera tried harder. She set the table without being asked. She kept her room spotless. She stayed quiet during Vanessa's visits, hoping that maybe if she were perfect enough, invisible enough, Vanessa might actually like her. If you were a child in this situation, trying so hard to win someone's approval, what would you do? Let me know in the comments. 6 months later, Vanessa's presence in their home had shifted from occasional visits to near constant. She had her own key, her own shelf in the bathroom, her own opinions about everything from Meera's bedtime to the color of the living room walls. Daniel seemed grateful for the help, for the structure, for the feeling of not being so desperately alone. But the structure came with a price Meera was beginning to understand. "Don't you think she should be in bed by 8?" Vanessa would say, her voice light but pointed. "Children need routine." "She's 11, not 5, Daniel would respond, but there was hesitation in his voice. "I'm just saying, if she had more structure, maybe she wouldn't be so—" Vanessa would trail off meaningfully, letting Daniel fill in the blank. "Difficult, needy, in the way." The suggestions came more frequently. Meera needed tutoring, even though her grades were excellent. Meera needed activities outside the home, even though she was already in soccer and art class. Meera needed, and this was said with a concerned frown that made Daniel's face crease with worry, professional help to deal with her attachment issues. "She's very clingy with you," Vanessa said. One evening while Meera sat on the stairs, supposedly doing homework, but actually listening to every word. "It's not healthy. She needs to learn independence." "She's just been through a lot," Daniel said, and Meera could hear the guilt in his voice. "I know, and I'm not criticizing. I just wonder if she might do better in a structured environment. Boarding school, maybe." Just for a year or two. Give her space to grow. Give you space to move forward. The words hit Meera like ice water. Boarding school. Send her away. Remove her. Daniel didn't agree that night, but he didn't immediately refuse either. He said he'd think about it, and that was somehow worse than a direct no. After they went to bed, Meera sat on her bedroom floor, hugging her knees to her chest. The velvet box sat on her dresser, where it had been for 5 years, gathering dust. She thought about her mother's instructions but pushed the thought away. Daddy was happy. That was supposed to be good. Wasn't that what Mama wanted? But the next afternoon, when Daniel was still at work, Vanessa came by to drop off groceries. Meera was sitting at the kitchen table trying to finish an essay. Vanessa walked past her to put milk in the fridge, and as she passed, Meera heard her mutter under her breath, just loud enough to be heard. This child reminds him too much of her dead mother. I need her gone. Meera's pencil froze mid-word. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. She looked up. But Vanessa's back was turned, her movements casual as she arranged groceries, as if she hadn't just said the cruelest thing Meera had ever heard. That night, Meera barely touched her dinner. Daniel noticed, asking if she felt okay, but she just nodded and excused herself early. In her room, she stared at the velvet box for a long time, her mother's voice echoing in her memory. When Daddy tries to start over, when someone tries to push you away. Not yet, she told herself. Not yet. 3 months later, Daniel called Meera into the living room. He was smiling, genuinely smiling, in a way she hadn't seen since before Mama got sick. Vanessa sat beside him on the couch, her hand in his, a glittering ring on her finger catching the lamplight. Sweetheart, I have something to tell you, Daniel said, pulling Meera close. Vanessa and I are getting married. Meera's breath caught. For a split second, hope flared in her chest. Bright and desperate. A wedding meant family. It meant Vanessa would officially be her stepmother, would have to care about her, would finally stop looking at her like something to be disposed of. Maybe everything would be better now. Maybe Vanessa had just been nervous, unsure of her place, and the wedding would change everything. Really? Meera asked, her voice small but hopeful. Really, Daniel said, kissing the top of her head. You're going to have a mom again. Vanessa smiled, but when Daniel looked away to grab his phone to show Meera photos of the venue, Vanessa's eyes met Meera's across the room, cold, sharp. The message was clear, don't get your hopes up. Still, Meera tried to hold on to the hope. She asked about the wedding dress, about flowers, about whether she could help with anything. Vanessa answered in short, clipped responses when Daniel was listening and ignored her completely when he wasn't. The wedding was planned for spring, just 2 months away. The house filled with catalogs and color swatches and excited phone calls. Daniel was lighter than he'd been in years, whistling while he made coffee, joking during dinner. Meera wanted desperately to share his joy, to believe that this was the beginning of something good. But late one night, she heard voices from the master bedroom, Daniel and Vanessa arguing in hushed tones. I just think it's a lot for her, Vanessa was saying. Weddings are emotional events. She's so sensitive. Don't you think she might be overwhelmed? She'll be fine. She's excited about it. Is she, though? Or is she just pretending? Daniel, I love you, and I want our wedding day to be perfect. I don't want her feeling pressured to perform, to pretend to be happy when she's probably terrified of losing you. She's not losing me. I know that. But does she? Think about how much stress she's already under. Maybe it would be better if she spent that day somewhere comfortable, somewhere she feels safe. Your sister would take her for the weekend, wouldn't she? There was a long silence. Then Daniel's voice, uncertain, guilty. You really think that's best? I think we need to do what's best for Meera, not just what's easiest for us. Meera backed away from the door, her heart sinking. Vanessa was good at this, at twisting concern into control, at making cruelty sound like kindness. The conversation came 2 weeks before the wedding. Daniel sat Meera down at the kitchen table, his hands folded in front of him, his face creased with discomfort. "Sweetheart, I need to talk to you about the wedding." Meera's stomach dropped. She already knew, but she sat quietly, waiting. "Vanessa and I have been thinking, and we believe it might be better if you spent that day with Aunt Caroline. It's going to be a long day, a lot of people, a lot of noise and emotion. We thought you might be more comfortable." "I want to be there," Meera interrupted, her voice cracking. Daniel winced. "I know you do, baby, but this is a big day, and we want you to feel happy, not stressed or overwhelmed." "I won't be overwhelmed. I want to see you get married. She stopped, unable to finish. "I want to be part of this family." "It's already decided," Vanessa said from the doorway, her voice firm but pleasant. "Your aunt is looking forward to spending time with you. You two can do something fun together." Meera looked at her father, silently begging him to change his mind, to fight for her, to see what was really happening. But Daniel just looked tired and sad, and he reached out to squeeze her hand. "I'm sorry, Meera. I really think this is for the best." That night, Meera lay in bed staring at the ceiling, tears sliding silently down her temples into her hair. Her mother's face floated in her memory, smiling, healthy, whole. She thought about the velvet box, about the promise she'd made. When Daddy tries to start over, when someone tries to push you away, she was being pushed. She knew that now. Meera curled up on her bed that night, clutching her pillow as if it were a shield against everything happening around her. She whispered to herself that maybe Vanessa was right. Maybe she didn't belong in that wedding. Maybe she didn't belong anywhere in this new version of her father's life. A tiny part of her wondered if she should stay quiet, stay away, and hope things would somehow get better on their own. But something in her chest tightened painfully, the same feeling she used to get when she missed her mother so badly she couldn't breathe. She pressed her palms into her eyes and tried not to cry again. The cruelty came 3 days before the wedding. Daniel had gone to pick up his tuxedo, leaving Meera and Vanessa alone in the house. Meera was in the kitchen making a sandwich when Vanessa walked in, her heels clicking against the tile. "We should talk," Vanessa said, leaning against the counter. Meera looked up, hopeful, despite everything. Maybe now, with the wedding so close, Vanessa would finally be honest, finally try. "I need you to understand something," Vanessa continued, her voice casual, as if discussing the weather. "This wedding is my day. Mine and your father's. It's not about you. You're not part of this, not really. You're a remnant of his past, and frankly, you make things complicated." Meera's hand stilled on the bread. "He loves you, I know that. But you remind him of her. Every time he looks at you, he sees his dead wife. And that makes it harder for him to move on, to be happy with me. So you're going to stay away from the wedding, and then we're going to talk seriously about that boarding school. You'll be better off there. And honestly, so will we." The words landed like physical blows. Meera couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Vanessa smiled, a cold, satisfied smile, and walked out of the kitchen as if she'd just commented on the weather. Meera stood frozen for minutes, maybe hours. Then she ran to her room and cried into her pillow, muffling the sounds so no one would hear. Would you forgive someone who said this to a child? Let me know in the comments what you think should happen next. When the sun rose on the morning of the wedding, Meera stood by her dresser, staring at the velvet box. She reached for it twice but pulled her hand back each time, fear twisting her stomach. What if she ruined everything? What if her father got angry? What if Vanessa convinced him she was the problem? She picked up the box, then quickly set it down again, shaking. For a brief, shattering moment, she almost decided not to open it at all, to just stay behind, be good, and hope love would somehow be enough. But the thought of losing her father completely made her chest ache so sharply she had to grab the edge of her bed to steady herself. The morning of the wedding arrived cold and gray, the sky threatening rain. Daniel came into Meera's room early, already dressed in his undershirt and suit pants. He sat on the edge of her bed and brushed hair back from her forehead the way he used to when she was small. "I'm sorry you can't be there," he said quietly. "I wish things were different." Meera looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the man her mother had loved, kind, gentle, trying so hard to do the right thing even when he wasn't sure what that was. She wanted to tell him everything Vanessa had said, everything she'd done, but the words stuck in her throat. What if he didn't believe her? What if it made things worse? "I love you, Daddy," she whispered instead. "I love you too, sweetheart, more than anything." He kissed her forehead, his lips lingering for a moment. "Aunt Caroline will be here soon. Be good for her." Then he was gone, the sound of his car fading down the driveway. Meera sat up in bed, her chest tight with grief and anger and helplessness. She looked around her room, the posters on the walls, the books on the shelves, the velvet box on her dresser. The velvet box. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory, clear as if Tasha were standing right there. "When someone tries to push you away, when Daddy needs protecting." Meera climbed out of bed and walked to the dresser. Her hands shook as she picked up the box, feeling its weight, its promise. She'd kept it for 5 years, honoring her mother's request to wait, to trust. But if not now, when? If not today? When her father was about to marry someone who hated her, when would it matter? She opened the box. Inside, nestled in the velvet, were 3 things: a small golden key with an engraved number, an audio chip no bigger than her thumbnail, and a letter sealed with her mother's initial. Meera broke the seal and pulled out the letter, her mother's handwriting swimming before her tear-filled eyes. "My darling Meera, if you're reading this, someone has tried to remove you from your father's life. I'm so sorry you had to face this. But you need to know. The key opens a safe deposit box at First National Bank. Show your father this letter and the key, play him the audio recording, and go with him to open the box. Everything he needs to know is inside. Trust me, baby. Trust that I loved you both enough to prepare for this. Protect him. Protect yourself. I'm always with you. Mama." Meera clutched the letter to her chest, her whole body shaking. Then, with sudden determination, she grabbed the velvet box and ran. Aunt Caroline wasn't there yet. Meera didn't wait. She shoved her feet into sneakers, not bothering with socks, and ran out the door. The church was 3 miles away. Too far to walk quickly, but she didn't care. She ran down the sidewalk, the velvet box clutched in both hands, her breath coming in gasps, her legs burning. She had to get there. She had to stop this. She had to show him. The church rose before her, white and pristine against the gray sky, cars filling the parking lot. Meera's shoes were scuffed and dusty, her hair wild from running, but she didn't stop. She pushed through the heavy wooden doors just as the organ music swelled. The ceremony had begun. Meera stood at the back of the sanctuary, breathing hard, and saw them at the altar. Her father in his tuxedo, tall and handsome. Vanessa in white, radiant, glowing with triumph. The officiant stood between them, holding an open Bible, his voice carrying through the hushed space. If anyone has reason why these two should not be joined in marriage, speak now or forever hold your peace. Every head in the church turned at the sound of Meera's footsteps on the stone floor. She walked down the aisle, slow and steady now, her eyes locked on her father's face. She saw his confusion, his shock, his instant concern. She saw Vanessa's face drain of color, fear flashing across her features before she covered it with anger. "Meera?" Daniel took a step toward her. "What are you doing here? Where's Caroline?" Meera reached the altar and held out the velvet box with shaking hands. "Mama's left this for you. She said to give it to you if someone ever tried to take me away from you." The church went utterly silent. 200 guests leaned forward, cameras forgotten, breaths held. Daniel stared at the box, his face crumbling with emotion. "Open it, Daddy. Please." With trembling fingers, Daniel took the box. He lifted the lid and saw the contents: the key, the chip, the letter. He picked up the letter first, his eyes scanning his late wife's handwriting, tears spilling down his cheeks. "There's a recording," Meera whispered. "Mama made it for you." Someone in the crowd, Daniel's best man, stepped forward with his phone, and Daniel handed him the tiny audio chip. Moments later, speakers crackled to life, and Tasha's voice filled the church, soft and loving and heartbreakingly alive. "My darling Daniel, if you're hearing this, it means Meera needed to reach you. It means someone has tried to come between you and our daughter, and I couldn't let that happen without fighting back, even from wherever I am now." Daniel's legs buckled. He sat heavily on the altar steps, his head in his hands. "I want you to be happy. I want you to love again, to find someone who makes you laugh and feel alive. But I also know that there are people in this world who will see Meera as an obstacle, not a blessing. If that's happening, if someone is trying to push our baby girl away from you, you need to know the truth." The recording paused, and in that silence, Vanessa moved. She grabbed for the box, but Meera pulled it back, holding it close to her chest. "The golden key," Tasha's voice continued, "opens safe. Deposit box 2847 at First National Bank. Inside you'll find documents, photos, messages, everything you need to know about the person standing beside you." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Vanessa's face went from pale to red, her eyes wild. "I hired a private investigator before I died. I wanted to make sure that whoever came into your life after me would be worthy of you, worthy of our daughter. I hope to God you never need this, that you find someone wonderful who loves Meera as much as you do. But if you're hearing this message, that's not who you're with. Please, my love, go to the bank. See for yourself. Protect our daughter. Protect yourself. I loved you then, I love you now, and I'll love you always. Tell Meera I'm proud of her. Tell her Mama kept her promise." The recording ended. The silence that followed was deafening. If you feel for this child right now, hit the like button. If you're on the edge of your seat, comment below where you're watching from. "Daniel, I can explain," Vanessa started, her voice shrill. "Explain what?" Daniel stood slowly, the velvet box still in his hands, his face a mask of betrayal and confusion. "Explain why my dead wife felt the need to investigate you. Explain why she left warnings. She was paranoid. She was sick and scared and—" "The key," Meera said, holding it up. Her voice was small but steady. "We need to see what's in the box." Daniel looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and saw the pain she'd been carrying, the rejection she'd endured, the love she'd protected despite everything. He saw Tasha in her eyes, in her courage, in her refusal to let him make a terrible mistake. "The wedding is over," he said quietly. "Daniel, no!" Vanessa grabbed his arm. "You can't be serious. You're going to throw away our future because of a recording from a dead woman?" He pulled his arm free, his voice harder now. "She's not just a dead woman. She was my wife, the mother of my child, and she was brilliant enough to protect us even after she was gone." He looked at the best man. "Mike, can you drive us to the bank? Now?" 20 minutes later, Daniel, Meera, and Mike stood in the sterile vault of First National Bank. The manager, confused but professional, used the golden key to open box 2847. Inside was a thick manila folder. Daniel opened it with shaking hands. The documents inside told a story that made his blood run cold. Emails from Vanessa to her sister, discussing how much money Daniel had, how the house would be hers once they married, how she'd convinced him to update his will. Photos of text messages she'd sent to boarding schools inquiring about year-round programs for children. Bank statements showing Vanessa had been slowly transferring small amounts from Daniel's accounts to her own. A printed conversation where she told a friend that Meera was an inconvenient reminder she planned to deal with. There were more documents too. Property records showing Vanessa had tried to claim ownership of items that had belonged to Tasha. Insurance papers that had been altered. Legal documents that gave her power of attorney that Daniel had signed without fully reading. At the bottom of the folder was a note in Tasha's handwriting. "I'm sorry you had to see this, but better to know now than after she's destroyed everything we built. Love, Meera. Choose Meera. Always choose our daughter." Daniel sank into a chair in the vault, the papers scattering around him. He looked at Meera, standing small and brave in her dusty shoes and tear-stained face, holding the empty velvet box like a shield. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "Meera, I'm so sorry." They returned to the church to chaos. Guests milled about, confused and gossiping. Vanessa stood in the sanctuary, still in her wedding dress, her makeup smeared from crying. When she saw Daniel, she rushed toward him. "Did you see it? That folder is full of lies. She faked those documents because she was jealous, because she knew I'd make you happier than she ever could." "Stop," Daniel said, his voice flat and final. "Just stop." He walked to the front of the church and addressed the assembled guests. "I apologize for the confusion today. The wedding is canceled. It won't be rescheduled. Vanessa and I are done." "Daniel, please," Vanessa's voice cracked. "You're making a mistake. That child has poisoned you against me." "That child," Daniel said, turning to face her, "is my daughter. And you tried to remove her from my life. You manipulated me, lied to me, stole from me, and worst of all, you made my little girl feel unwanted in her own home. How long, Vanessa? How long were you planning this? She's just a child. She'll grow up, move out, and then where will you be? Alone. I was offering you a future. A future without my daughter isn't a future I want." Vanessa looked around the church at the guests staring at her with a mixture of pity and disgust, at Daniel's face set in stone, at Meera standing quietly by his side. She let out a sound somewhere between a sob and a scream, grabbed the skirt of her wedding dress, and ran. The church doors slammed behind her, echoing through the sanctuary. Then it was quiet, except for the sound of someone starting to clap. Then another person. Then another, until applause filled the space, not for a wedding but for the truth. Do you support what just happened here? Comment your reaction below. That night, after the guests had gone and the church had been cleared, Daniel and Meera sat together in her bedroom. The velvet box sat between them on the bed, empty now, but still precious. "I should have seen it," Daniel said, his voice broken. "I should have protected you." "You couldn't have known," Meera said. "That's why Mama prepared. She knew you'd want to believe the best in people. She was protecting us both, even after—" He couldn't finish. Meera leaned against his shoulder, and Daniel wrapped his arms around her, holding her the way he should have been holding her all along. "I'm never letting anyone push you away again," he whispered into her hair. "You're my priority. You're my heart. I'm so sorry. I forgot that." "I know, Daddy." They sat in silence for a long time, grief and relief mixing together in the quiet darkness. Finally, Daniel spoke again. "Your mother, she was incredible, wasn't she?" "She still is," Meera said, touching the velvet box. "She kept her promise. She protected us." "She did." Daniel picked up the box, running his fingers over the soft fabric. "Through you. She protected us through you, brave girl." Meera smiled, really smiled, for the first time in months. She thought about her mother's voice on the recording, about the documents in the bank vault, about the golden key that had unlocked the truth. She thought about Vanessa's face when everything fell apart, about her father's tears, about standing in that church aisle with dusty shoes and a heart full of courage. "Are you going to be okay?" she asked her father. Daniel pulled her closer. "With you here? Always. We're going to be okay, sweetheart. Together." Outside, rain had finally begun to fall, washing away the dust and leaving everything clean. Inside, Daniel held his daughter and felt, for the first time since Tasha died, that they might actually survive this. Not just survive, but heal. He understood now what Tasha had known all along, that Meera wasn't just their daughter, she was their legacy, their best creation, the living proof of their love. He kissed the top of Meera's head and whispered a silent thank you to the woman who had loved them enough to protect them even after death, who had known that true love doesn't end, it just transforms, finding new ways to reach across the impossible distance and hold the ones it cherishes close. The velvet box sat between them, empty, but full of meaning, a testament to a mother's love and a daughter's courage and a father's awakening to what truly mattered. If this touched your heart, don't scroll without hitting subscribe. Stories like this need to be shared. Let me know in the comments how you're feeling right now. Sometimes life brings people into our world who smile with their mouths but harm with their intentions. And sometimes the people who save us are the ones who are the smallest, the quietest, the ones everyone overlooks, like Meera. Her courage changed everything. Her voice, even when shaking, became the truth that set her father free. But here's the question only you can answer. If you were Meera, would you have spoken up or stayed silent? Be honest. Your answer says a lot about who you truly are. And if you were Daniel, would you forgive yourself for not seeing the signs earlier? Or would that guilt follow you forever? Tell me what you think. I want to read every single opinion. And finally, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your country, your city. Let's see how far this story travels. Your voice matters here. Your perspective matters. Don't just watch, be part of the story.